Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Hillary Cohen, and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Engagement for New Brunswick with the Rutgers University Alumni Association. Thank you all for being with us today. It's great to see so many faces in person, and I know that we have a lot of alumni and friends online as well. Before we begin, I do have a few brief housekeeping items to review. First, please keep your mask on at all times unless you are eating or drinking actively. Second, we ask everybody to please silence your phones. And third, please note the Q&A will be held after each presentation. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and a staff member will bring a microphone to you. For those of you streaming on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to drop your questions in the comments section. We do have someone who will be addressing those as well. We will get to as many questions as possible. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. James Hughes. Dr. Hughes was named University Professor by the Rutgers Board of Governors in 2017. As university professor, he has the university-wide privilege of conducting research and educational activities across the disciplines and schools of his choice. This prestigious position follows his 22-year tenure as the Dean of the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers. He is the author or co-author of 33 books and monographs and more than 125 articles. It is now my privilege to turn it over to Dr. Hughes.
Do we have this set up? Well, thank you for that kind introduction. Truth in advertising, however, my marching orders that I was given today: be brief, be sincere, be gone. So with the discipline I have not shown in many years, I will attempt to comply and proceed forthwith. Two basic admonitions I should give you since we're trying to look into the future today. First, I've often been accused of being much better at forecasting the past than forecasting the future. And second, I've also been accused of being the Garden State doomster. Very, very unfair, but probably due to the simple fact that I've forecast fully nine of our last 5 recessions. So you are twice forewarned. Okay, let me start off by offering congratulations to all of you. Since you are all still vertical and have not yet turned toes up, you have survived 2020, the year of the great economic contraction. You have survived the worst downturn since the Great Depression. So what comes next? But first, I think a cyclical retrospective is warranted. A quick glance in the economic rearview mirror just to see how bad it was and how far we've come back. February 2020, exactly 20 months ago, was actually the terminal month of a historic record-long economic expansion. It encompassed 10 straight years of sustained, strong job growth. We were in a Goldilocks economy, not too hot, not too cold, just right. We had record high employment levels, record low unemployment rates, and minimal inflation. In the preceding 10 years, February 2010 to February 2020, the US had gained 22.8 million jobs. That's shaded in yellow on the top of the slide, plus 22.8 million jobs. But then, unfortunately, an old adage rears its ugly head. Oops. There we are. We have yet to discover how to invent a boom that lasts forever. Expansions are usually murdered by the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates or the bursting of economic bubbles. This time it was done in by an unforeseen assassin, COVID-19. Goldilocks quickly unraveled as the global coronavirus pandemic caused a series of convulsive and staggering economic events. As shown in the middle of this slide, in a breathtaking 2-month freefall, the nation lost 22.4 million jobs, nearly fully erasing 10 full years of job growth. So livelihoods had to be sacrificed in order to save lives. The first deliberately engineered recession caused a hyperspeed economic plunge. I think only the cosmetic skills of an embalmer could have improved the complexion of our employment situation at that point in time. But just when I was convinced that we were irretrievably sliding into the economic abyss, something happened, something which actually shocked me. The world neglected to come to an end. We did start to emerge from deep in the economic dumpster, although forecast of when that would happen did vary widely. I think that substantiates the old saying that if you took all the economic forecasters in New Jersey and laid them end to end, they'd still point in different directions. Actually, there are 3 kinds of forecasters in New Jersey, 3 kinds: those who can count and those who can't. And all 3 types have never demonstrated any visible skills at forecasting turning points in the economic cycle. But we now know definitively that April 2020 marked the real turning point, the technical end of the Great Contraction. This was announced by the Business Cycle Dating Committee of the National Bureau of Economic Research this past July. That's the organization that tells us when recessions start and stop. Since the recession started in February of 2020, its 2-month length actually made it the shortest recession in history, notwithstanding the extraordinary depth of its job losses and human pain. However, despite the dating committee's formal determination, I think more people in New Jersey believe they were abducted by aliens than believe the recession officially ended 1.5 years ago. That's actually a picture of me being pulled kicking and screaming into the alien mothership. It was not a pleasant experience. Nonetheless, following the trough of April 2020, the process of recovery commenced. The restart button was hit, and we started to climb out of the depths of the economic freefall as job growth strongly resumed. The full 16-month rebound to date is shaded in yellow. Tomorrow we'll get the numbers for September. But total employment increased by 17 million jobs between April 2020 and August 2021. That represents a 76% employment recovery rate. We've recovered 17 million of the 22.4 million jobs that were lost. And that's not a bad bounce back. Nonetheless, we still have to add 5.4 million jobs to achieve full recovery. And that's the number outlined on the bottom of the slide. We could consider that our employment deficit as of August, 5.4 million jobs. Despite this, a new period of labor shortages has emerged. Help wanted signs are every place, as I think all of us can attest to. And this is one of the most vexing economic paradoxes produced by the pandemic: more unfilled job openings than there are unemployed people. The last numbers we have, 8.7 million unemployed people nationally, 10.1 million unfilled job openings at present, an unprecedented gap. Now, we could spend the rest of the day discussing the many explanations of the phenomenon, but looking forward, labor shortages may now be a permanent part of our economic landscape. A residual from the recession is a shifting power dynamic from employers to employees, and this is going to be a key feature of life in the workplace in 2022. Suffice it to say, the painful shocks of the pandemic and the Great Contraction have shaken our economic foundations. And these shocks are going to shape life in 2022 and beyond. And they will intersect with ongoing demographic disruptions, which we'll turn to shortly. Okay, so what lies ahead? First, the pandemic has expedited the future. For example, as most of us have experienced, we had 3 years of digital cultural adaptation in the first 3 weeks of the pandemic. COVID-19 has been a gasoline on the fire accelerant. It has vastly increased the pace of structural change that was already underway, such as accelerating remote work practices. That's both working at home and online meetings and conferencing, accelerating the surge in e-commerce, accelerating the bricks and mortar retail meltdown, accelerating millennial residential suburbanization, accelerating baby boom retirements, and accelerating the importance of Gen Z, the new entry-level digital workforce. Embedded change in each of those areas has been transformed into hyper change. For example, because of online shopping growth, bricks and mortar retail carnage had long been underway. But what was anticipated as a multi-year meltdown quickly took place in a matter of months. Think Neiman Marcus and J.C. Penney in bankruptcy. Clicks increasingly replace bricks. So consequently, the economic landscape is now filling up with massive fulfillment centers at an accelerating pace. Windowless 1 million square foot behemoths. Now, what could sound more virtuous than a fulfillment center? What marketing genius, perhaps a perverted marketing genius, came up with the label fulfillment? It suggests happiness delivered, just what America ordered. Obsolete office buildings and shopping centers are being leveled and the sites converted to fulfillment centers. This is the 1.5 million square feet, 500,000 square foot global headquarters for Continental Insurance in Cranberry, New Jersey, a once sparkling state-of-the-art office building. It has recently been demolished, a new site for delivering happiness. It's being replaced by 2 warehouse distribution facilities. So much of our office market conditions, particularly suburban office market conditions, oversupplied and under-demolished, oversupplied and under-demolished. Developers are on track to remove nearly 9 million square feet of obsolete office space in New Jersey over the next 2 years. So that physical economic transformation is going to characterize 2022. Now there's a new additional phenomenon spurred on by the pandemic. To speed up the delivery of happiness, e-commerce is producing smaller last mile delivery stations. Now, a perfect location for last mile delivery stations are vacant retail properties. Again, this portends another major commercial land use transformation. Coming to a vacant shopping center near you. Delivery speed is of the essence, and a new consumer ecosystem is continuing to evolve. Bottom line, you will only see more of this in 2022, the new blue crew. Now, while online sales will certainly grow, despite the bricks and mortar meltdown, offline sales are not going to fade away next year. Shoppers may well discover the pleasure of in-store purchases or in-store pickups. So omni-channel retailing, mixing digital and in-store experiences, is going to continue to advance and evolve in 2022. Even Amazon will be expanding its physical store footprint. They're designing a new type of Amazon department store. However, labor shortages, that may make the in-store experience less positive than expected. Let's quickly turn to office markets, work processes, and workplaces. The The pandemic has obviously upended the world of work, the basic functioning and structure of the office market and the workplace. This is nothing less than a watershed moment. It's now a well-told story, but certainly the final chapter has not yet been written. Basic question, will the magnitude of distress in office markets caused by the pandemic match the distress of bricks and mortar retailing caused by the rise of e-commerce? Work is now being redefined. The coronavirus shock revealed that many pre-COVID-19 offices were really being run as relics of the 20th century, despite massive advances in information technology. But the dinosaur has been forced to evolve. It is now recognized that in many cases, certainly not all, but in many cases, work is much more of an activity rather than as a physical place. A portion of white-collar work has been decoupled from presence in the office. So a serious rethink of work and a serious rethink of the traditional knowledge-based office will continue to dominate 2022. Additional rethink, blind acceptance of long commutes guided by rigid 9-to-5 schedules. I think this will be an endangered species. The ritual of commuting 5 days per week, 52 weeks per year, to centralized headquarters offices in order to simply be crammed cheek by jowl in a sea of workstations. That's their reward for a 2-hour commute each day. A signature transformative event of the year 2020 was the shift to remote out of the office work from home protocols. In fact, March 2020 through June 2020 could be called the spring of remote work. And what emerged was a new pandemic-inspired acronym, WFH, work from home. At the end of the day, this could rank as one of the great office market disruptors of all time. Suffice it to say, there may be a significant rebalancing of the entire office and work ecosystem. And that rebalancing process is now testing a range of hybrid work models and agile distributed networks, a blend of in-office and out-of-office work. And the emerging hybrid work way of life will continue to mature in 2022. In the immediate future, we are now confronting the return to office quandary as the great remote work experiment is actually approaching its 20th month. WFH, work from home, versus RTO, return to office. 2022 is going to see more friction developing between executives who want the workplace to return to pre-pandemic normals and employees and workers much more appreciative of and ultimately demanding remote work options. So right now, there's no final blueprint, no final established playbook, and best practices are still in the testing phase. And there are many unresolved questions. One of my definitive forecasts, no one will ever say on their deathbed, I wish I had spent more time in the office. Now, I should have pointed out to you earlier that economic forecasters are not held in very high esteem in New Jersey. In fact, we're not considered very exciting people. And I think the following story is illustrative. We're stuck. Back on stream. Okay. A woman hears from her doctor that she has only a half a year to live, just 6 months. Distraught, she asks the doctor, what should I do? Doctor tells her, quickly marry an economic forecaster. The woman asks her, will marrying an economic forecaster cure my illness? No, the doctor responds, but it's going to make the 6 months seem like a lifetime. In any case, 2022 will be the year of the fundamental reset. The shelf life of many of our pre-pandemic assumptions and certainties has expired. COVID-19 is turning out to be a transformational, long-term disruption that requires organizations to hit the reset button, an organizational reexamination of the fundamentals of work, workforce, workplace. Okay, let's now pivot, turn to demographics and generational disruptions that are reshaping America and a rethinking of lifestyle choices and desires. During the pandemic, we have continued to experience the relentless changing of the demographic guard, the greatest age structure transformation in history. COVID-19 or its Delta variant did not change the aging process nor the biological time clock, but it has accelerated changes in generational behavior and decision-making. So let's examine the generational transformations, which I sometimes call demographic long waves, and the disruptions that are shaping the future. It consists of 4 specific long waves, which is one way of viewing population change. Each generation is much more diverse than its predecessor. We'll start with the baby boom. The rapidly maturing suburban-centric baby boom born 1946 to 1964, which has been redefining maturity. The second is the full middle aging of Gen X, or baby bust, born between 1965 and 1980, advancing to the C-suite, the corporate leadership C-suite, and organizational leadership positions. Third, family-raising, formerly urban-centric young millennials, or Gen Y, born between 1981 and 1996, who over the past decade have redefined the workforce and the workplace. And finally, fourth, Gen Z or post-millennials, born 97 to 2012, the new entry-level workforce. So let's review each of these briefly and start with the ancients. The fabled baby boom born 1946 to 1964. Truth in advertising. One of my favorite academic spectator sports is terrorizing baby boomers about their inexorable aging. And I think there may be a few maturing boomers here today. But I will spare you that torture, but not completely. The baby boom was the most influential demographic event shaping the second half of the 20th century. Its rule was once unquestioned, but now they are entering the next stage of their life cycle odyssey. Sorry, boomers, the arrow indicates your life cycle position today. This is one example of my expanded favorite academic spectator sport, taunting baby boomers by telling them they are in the pre-deceased stage of the life cycle, Again, truth be told, I've been desperately trying my best to remain in the pre-deceased stage of the life cycle and not move on to the next one. In any case, at one time when they were Rutgers students, boomers used to rock around the clock. Now they're starting to limp around the block. This year, 2021, leading edge boomers are turning 75 years of age, while the median or middle boomer turns 66. Now, they consider this a calamity of biblical proportions. As a result, the generation that was once alleged to have dropped acid in order to escape reality is now rapidly dropping antacids in order to cope with reality. Seriously, prior to the pandemic, every 7.5 seconds, another baby boomer retired in the United States, every 7.5 seconds. That's 10,000 per day, a pace far outstripping the casualty rate of hunting accidents and car wrecks combined. But the new pandemic-altered reality has caused many boomers to accelerate their departure from the workforce. Their retirement plans have been rescripted, adding to the problem of labor shortfalls. And this is really the first visible example of COVID-19 affecting generational behavior. Consequently, the acceleration of the baby boom out of the workforce represents the greatest brain drain in the nation's history, and all dimensions of economic activity are being impacted. How to retain and capture retiring baby boom knowledge is a critical issue for all organizations in 2022. However, looking forward, there is one piece of good news many of you may consider very good news as the baby boom's influence wanes. Pretty soon, you won't have to listen anymore to the Beach Boys on golden oldie radio stations. Now, as an aside, earlier today, one of my former students, a leading edge maturing baby boomer, came up to me and expressed very deep concern about getting older. I said, "Not to worry, boomer. Ahead of you lies romance, adventure, excitement, mystery, and a lot of other great reading." Second long wave, make way for the Gen Xers. So move over, boomers. This 2021 started the beginning of a new era, and it's going to continue in 2022. The first Gen Xers turned 56 this year, furiously raising families and trading up in the housing markets. Gen Xers are poised to assume the leadership ranks left open by exiting boomers, again, a process accelerated by the pandemic. In any case, all of you maturing Gen Xers, we're really depending upon you. In 2022, the full mantle of leadership will increasingly be thrust upon you. Another inevitable change accelerated by the pandemic. Now, I should have also pointed out to you earlier, like economic forecasters, demographers are also not held in very high esteem. In fact, we have been dismissed simply as academics, just academics, sometimes sneeringly so, who can statistically prove that the average resident of Miami is born Cuban and dies Jewish. Third demographic cohort, Gen Y millennials. Gen Y millennials, born between 1981 and 1996. They comprise the first population cohort born and reared in the digital age, the first digital age generation. That's their key defining element. Well, not completely. Before the pandemic, they had become known as Generation Avocado Toast, the new breakfast of champions. In any case, millennials are largely the offspring of the fabled baby boom, bolstered by immigration and immigration offspring. It is the most diverse workforce generation in 100 years. And over the past decade, they became the prized labor force commodity, eagerly sought by all organizations that required next-gen digital talent. Much of their pre-pandemic spatial movements could be described as sprawl withdrawal, exiting the suburbs and heading to 24/7 LWP environments, heading to pulsating urban-centric live, work, play LWP places. As a result, the suburbs had actually gotten a bad rap during the past decade, a relic of the way their parents wanted to live in the 20th century. But like each of the generations, millennials were not immune to aging. The biological time clock kept ticking. By 2020, the year of the Great Contraction, the oldest millennials had turned 39 years of age and had already entered the family raising stage of the life cycle. They had just tepidly begun their suburban odyssey, and many had been sitting on the fence. But the pandemic pushed many of them off the fence, accelerating their move to the suburbs. This may have been the most visible demographic disruption of the last 18 months. The result? The burbs are back. Child-rearing single-family units are back. New pandemic-driven life and work choices are revitalizing our suburbs. Home-centric lifestyles pursued by millennials are going to dominate 2022. Easier and more affordable lifestyles will be pursued by most demographic sectors. Suburban single-family units now represent the new double LWP habitat, live, learn, work, and play. The new housing model, an apocalypse bunker, and a finished machine for living, internalizing into the housing unit all of the necessities once provided by the external environment. So it's housing as amenity-laden, deeply feathered nests. Bottom line, family-raising millennials are going to define the largest housing market demographic for 2022 and the balance of the decade. And the growth of diverse 30-somethings will be the nation's demographic locomotive. In addition, as a result of this phenomenon, the sheer shortage of suburban single-family unit inventory is greatly inhibiting the chase for suburban home ownership. We have a tremendous shortage of single-family units. So millennials desperately pursuing suburban home ownership will dominate 2022. Gen Z, originally post-millennials, now designated Gen Z, born between 97 and 2012, is the first post-World War II cohort born in two different centuries, the 20th and the 21st. While millennials comprise the first generation raised in the digital age, Gen Z is the first generation raised in the modern mobile era of smartphones and social media. They have grown up with access and hyperconnectivity to everything, everywhere, instantaneously. This year, the oldest members of Gen Z have turned 24 and have just graduated from college. So move over, millennials. All new young entry force labor market members are now Gen Zers. This is the source of your new digital talent, the new Gujarati, the new entry-level workforce in 2022. They are also the urban replacements for suburbanizing, family-raising millennials. For many leading-edge Gen Zers that are currently working from home, a basic problem is the central office may be a remote concept. They may have a significant aversion to pre-pandemic work lifestyles. So a basic admonition is that all organizations must be prepared to repeat the labor market adjustments and disruptions that accompanied the coming of age of millennial. So bottom line is that generational disruptions will continue to spawn demographic transformations and disruptions. Generations, as I noted earlier, predictably move through sequential stages of the life cycle, and the aging process was immune to COVID-19. But behavior was and is being reshaped by COVID-19. So the key transformations impacting 2022 are the accelerating retirements of baby boomers, accelerating suburbanization of family-raising millennials, the ascension of Gen Z into the housing market and entry-level workforce, and for all demographics, the continued search for easier and more affordable lifestyles. Unfortunately, all forecasters are wrong eventually. Unfortunately, all forecasters are calamitously wrong eventually. But fortunately, eventually can be a very long time, and I'll be out of here, very difficult to find. So it's now time for me to utter those words you have been longing to hear, perhaps desperately longing to hear. In conclusion, actually that sigh of relief I just heard is premature. My conclusions tend to be very long. Seriously, I think it is well recognized that I'm the only totally objective person at Rutgers. And it is my totally objective opinion that after doing demographic and economic forecasts for the last 4 decades, you should now take my projections as gospel. You have my personal guarantee that they will occasionally be right. So let me quickly sum up. As we enter 2022, it is safe to say we will not return to pre-pandemic normals, but it is also not likely that we will achieve a fully post-pandemic world. More likely, we are entering a world in which we will have to coexist with COVID and its variants. That's the next normal, and it has yet to be fully defined. We are undergoing a reshaping of work in the economy and a reshaping of our economic and residential landscape. And the future is going to be strongly defined by the adaptation to continued structural change and further disruptions. A fundamental reset is underway, a reset in the way we live, in the way we work, in the way we shop, in the way we play. Technological and economic megaforces have been unleashed, and post-vaccination, post-full vaccination, we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. Technology is progressive, and once you introduce it, you really can't take it away. Now, at the risk of jeopardizing my hard-earned reputation as the Garden State doomster, let me suggest a positive forecast. The engines of economic disruption set in motion by COVID-19 may be in the process of being transformed into the engines of economic creativity, innovation, and technological advancement that are going to reshape the future. While it may be an over-the-top fantasy, we could experience a new roaring 20s decade, replicating the technology-driven advances of the 1920s. So there is an outside possibility that the full decade of the 2020s could encompass a technology-driven super cycle similar to that of 100 years ago. And there's a very strong analogy. Let's take a quick glance in the economic rearview mirror. A century ago, in July of 1921, the nation had just exited a punishing, a very severe 18-month-long recession that had followed a number of very, very significant socioeconomic disruptions, paralleling what's happened to the last 2 years. We had the demobilization shocks following the end of World War I. We had the devastating 1918-1920 Spanish flu, and we had misguided contractionary monetary policies pursued at that time by the Federal Reserve Board. But the end of the 2021 recession caused by those previous disruptions unexpectedly and surprisingly marked the start of a transformative economic and social period. It stretched from 1921 to 1929 and was popularly known as the Roaring Twenties, a decade of unprecedented growth and prosperity. It was a period driven by vast technological innovations that transformed the very structure of the economy. Fast forward 100 years to today. Will history now repeat itself? Will a post-pandemic Roaring 2020s unfold? Well, probably not. But as I said, it may be an over-the-rainbow fantasy, but in 1921, nobody predicted the Roaring Twenties. So let me now really finally conclude with a brief administrative lesson for all of us for the next normal, our new demographic and economic era. And it takes the form of the following story. A junior administrator, a senior administrator, and their boss had finally RTO'd, returned to the office. In celebration, they were walking together on their way to lunch at their favorite cafe, which had just reopened. They come across a wonder lamp on the sidewalk that hadn't been there before. They pick up the lamp, rub it, and a genie appears. The genie says, "Normally one is granted 3 wishes, but as you are 3, I will allow 1 wish each." So the overly eager, very rude senior administrator immediately shouted, "I want the first wish. I want the first wish. I want to be in the Bahamas on a fast boat and have no COVID variant worries." Poof, he was quickly gone. Seeing this, the junior administrator could not keep quiet and shouted, "I want the next wish. I want the next wish. I want to be in Florida on a lounge chair by the pool with a cocktail and have no COVID variant worries." Poof, he was quickly gone. The genie then turns to the boss and says, "Your wish, madame." The boss then finally tells the genie, "I want those 2 clowns back in the office, fully masked, socially distanced, working on their computers by the time I return from the office. Lesson of the story? It's better to let your boss speak first. Now, an old academic mentor of mine gave me the following presentation advice. Speak the truth, but leave immediately thereafter. Thereafter has just arrived. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Yes. Yes, that's always the danger of very, very long economic expansions, is that bubbles and distortions build up in the economy, and the bubble finally bursts. That was the case for the 1991 to 2001 great expansion, and that was essentially terminated by the bursting of the high technology capital investment bubble that had built up in the late 1990s. So that certainly is a danger if we head into a period ahead whereby we have a number of powerful forces that turn into excesses and the like. But I think the key point of the analogy was in the 1920s, the rise of the automobile industry, the spread of electrification throughout the country, the introduction of the radio, all of those technological forces reinvented the structure of the economy. And so technology was a huge driver. Of course, we had prohibition and all the social components of that. And the question is, we've had a lot of technological forces unleashed the past 2 years, which offer the potential to restructure the economy further. And we may have needed that. Again, we may have been stuck in a late 20th century mode, particularly in our office work and the like, that failed to adapt to the new technology.
There are a lot of help wanted signs out there, and I saw one that said paid daily, which I'd never seen before.
No, it's an amazing situation, again, to have, we're still down about 5.4 million jobs from where we were in February of 2020. But we have a record level of unfilled job openings and the like. And how we adapt to that over the coming years is going to be interesting. But it is certainly shifting power from employers to employees, because people are desperately seeking labor.
One other thing that I saw were that during this downturn, jobs were classified as non-essential. And if your career is based in the service industry and all of a sudden you become non-essential, what does that do for your dreams of staying in that industry and working in that industry in the future? So maybe that's why some people aren't going back to work, because they're trying to decide what they want to be in, something that's essential later on, and not something that could be closed down again, like in this past pandemic.
No, that is one of the reasons. I mean, there are multiple reasons, and that's certainly an important one. And some people have realized they weren't treated very well by their employer. So if they have an opportunity, they're going to try something else. A number of jobs like truck driving, long distance truck driving, are not very pleasant jobs and the like. So again, everything's going to have to be reset, I think, going forward. Oh, I've taunted baby boomers. Again, I'm a pre-baby boomer, so that means I'm older than all the baby boomers. But in Japan, I mean, this is good news for leading edge baby boomers. In Japan, which is an aging society, they have just made a formal change in their designation. Those 65 to 75 years of age are now classified as pre-old. So if you're in your early 70s, you're not old, you're pre-old. So we may have to adopt that going forward. Tom?
Jim, you haven't said much about what universities are going to be like after this.
We are going through the reset. We're going to have some employees that can work effectively from home. Other employees really have to be in place at the university. We have some advantages now with technology as it has evolved. We can now very easily have a guest lecturer from an expert in Europe sign on and lecture in your course. Previously, you'd have to fly the person here, put them overnight, give them an honorarium and the like. So that certainly is going to be a feature going forward. When you have online meetings, you can have a much larger audience than if you're forcing people to commute by rail or car to a centralized location. Just an interesting sidelight. I usually teach every year at a multiple day event known as Judicial College, run by the New Jersey Supreme Court. And Thanksgiving week, the entire judiciary shuts down in New Jersey. They leave one judge in each county for emergencies. And all the Superior and Supreme Court judges have 2 days of intense instruction and continuing education and the like. And I usually do it with another Rutgers grad, Judge Mel Galati. And it's held usually at the Marriott at Newark Airport. Great hotel, but most of the rooms only seat 40. So normally we would have 40 people in the classroom. So last year and this year it's being done online. And when we did it last year online, we had 140 people attending the class. So you have that type of technological advantage. But still, in many cases, it's really great to get out and see people in person and network. And the like. So you have advantages and disadvantages. Maybe universities will save a lot of travel money if a lot of conferences are run online rather than having to bring people in from around the country to one spot. It certainly lowers the carbon footprint and the like. But I think we are just starting to reinvent ourselves, for the new technological era. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. It is a strange new world indeed. We are going to take a short break before our next program. Then and now, Life at Rutgers, a panel will begin in 5 minutes. This 90-minute panel will include alumni from the 70s as well as current students as they compare life at Rutgers back then to their experiences today. If you are registered in advance for the Zimmerle Art Museum tour, the next tour will begin at 2 p.m. and a shuttle will be passing by the Student Center briefly to bring guests down to College Avenue as well as the Zimmerle Art Museum. We'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Thank you.